Trial Lawyers University, where the Titans come to train. Produced and powered by LawPods.
All right, we got Kurt Zaner joining us again from Denver, Colorado, and I heard spring is coming in Denver. Is that right, Kurt?
That's right.
May 1st.
That's right. The leaves are blooming, the sun is out, the birds are chirping.
I'd love to hear it, and Kurt's smiling. So, Kurt, you've had some time now to reflect on a traumatic, semi-traumatic moment in your life. I'd call it traumatic. I was traumatized for you because, we all know what it's like to not get the verdict we want. I mean, anybody's tried cases now, so it's like, now if people's never tried a case, they don't know what it's like, but only trial lawyers really know what that feeling's like. First of all, waiting for a jury. I feel like I'm waiting for a jury right now because I just sit in trial with Dale Gallipo and Michael Carrillo last week on a civil rights case. I sat through the entire trial. I missed one day where I went and saw Panish, but that was the direct examination day of their survivors. It was a wrongful death killing. It was actually a murder. These cops in these Riverside shows fucking murdered this poor guy. Oh, it was so terrible.
Oh boy.
The jury's been out for a day and a half now, and so they're going back this morning for a read back. But
yeah.
But I feel like even though I had no control of the case, I just went and saw it. I still feel like I'm on verdict watch. So
yeah,
it's nerve wracking. But anyways, so tell us about your trial that you had in Denver versus some big company called
Terumo, international Japanese conglomerate. Yeah. So for those who haven't heard, and probably a lot of you, because how would you know unless you're reading social media, which I'm not always doing, I lost a huge trial, and it was a very sobering and depressing, challenging verdict to receive. I've had my share of successes, which is great, and those are so fun to talk about and easy to talk about, and boy, that was great to just beat your own drum and toot your own horn, but the loss.
Well, this is your first time losing a civil case. I mean, you've lost criminal cases, but first time losing a civil case.
My first civil loss in about 20 jury trials. I guess I was starting to read some of my own news clippings and figured that this couldn't happen. And so I've been through this, as you know, Dan, you went and saw some of the trial. It was great to have you there. You got to hang out in the trial house. This was by far the hardest case I've ever had, the most complex case I've ever had. The most invested in the case financially, emotionally, psychologically, and the hardest I've ever worked on anything in my life. So for this to be the first loss was just devastating for me, but for my clients. So this is a toxic tort case. It was a 6-week trial. This company sterilizes medical equipment in the middle of the city of Lakewood called Terumo. And the way they sterilize medical equipment to make things sterile, the instruments they use, the tubes, is they use a highly carcinogenic, mutagenic, genotoxic chemical called ethylene oxide. Now, they use ethylene oxide because it's so good at killing things. It kills everything that's on the instruments, thereby making it sterile. However, it's lethal. Obviously, that's why they use it. And they use millions of pounds of it. And they do a very poor job, as we've alleged, of controlling it. And they allowed millions of pounds, as we proved and we alleged, out into the community. And so it's an odorless, colorless, silent killer. So no one knows that they've been breathing it in this community for decades. And the studies have shown that the constant inhalation of this carcinogen leads to 2 general types of cancers, and many others, but for this case, blood cancers and breast cancers. And so we had this trial, and it was 6 weeks long, and it spanned 50 years of behavior of Terumo and many predecessors and all sorts of different entities. So we had 50 years of behavior to uncover and to prove. Then we had 4 plaintiffs. I had 2, and the Edelson firm had 2. My clients had breast cancer. The other 2 clients had blood cancers. And it was an epic battle to prove to these jurors that Terumo did something wrong. They were negligent. We had a punitive damage claim granted as well, and that it caused our plaintiffs cancer, and of course they had damages. There have been 4 trials, maybe 5 trials before ours. The first one against different defendants, but same type of entity, ethylene oxide sterilization. The first one was a win by Pat Salvi. He did a great job.
That was dramatically different, though, because the government had shut down the facility, had basically determined it was a toxic dump site almost. I mean, so it was very different because I did a case analysis. That's why I know. So I was like watching your case compared to his case. I'm like, I'd take his case over your case. It's not even close.
Very
It's not even close.
very kind of you to say that, Dan. I don't want to bring that
No,
up 'cause I don't wanna I don't wanna
it's a very different case, but go on though. I just want to point that out.
No, that's and that was a challenge we had. I mean, the 5 previous trials, Pat won, where they shut down the plant in Illinois, and then there were 3 losses and a hung jury, and then us. So they're very challenging cases. And what the defendant had in this case, which they didn't have in Pat's case, was what you call a regulatory compliance defense. Hey, we followed the regulations. We never got in trouble with the EPA or the Colorado EPA. In fact, they called in people from the Colorado EPA to defend them and say what a great job they did following the Colorado regulations, keeping in line with everything they had to do, and getting high marks from all the regulatory authorities. And yesterday, we had the opportunity to speak to one of the jurors. He came to our office and chatted with us for about 2 hours. And that was front and center in everything he said. Look, they weren't required to do anything more than they did. They followed the rules. How can we hold them accountable for hundreds of millions of dollars if they never did anything wrong, if they followed all the rules they were supposed to follow? So that was just a huge uphill battle for us. And, we hired one of the it's called the CDPH&E, that's the Colorado EPA, the Colorado Department of Health and Education. We brought in one of the former officials there, and he, to try and defeat this regulatory defense. And he came in to say, look, as a government regulatory body, we weren't very concerned with Terumo because we weren't really aware of the dangers of ethylene oxide. So we didn't really regulate them at all to try and, say what does regulatory compliance really mean? Because there wasn't much regulation to begin with. So we did our best to fight that fight, but ultimately we lost on it. I mean, we brought in the head of the Air Pollution Control Division. They hired the head of the whole agency, right? They hired the number 2 guy at the EPA as their expert. I mean, they spent untold amount of cost to bring in the most high-priced, best credentialed experts around, and lots of them. We tried to follow the rules. We bring in one causation expert. We bring in one liability expert, and they were permitted to bring in a bunch. And that was one of the themes of the case. Look, there's only one doctor in the world that says their cancer was caused by this carcinogen. There's only one person in the world, one engineer, that says that they did something wrong. We have all these doctors, all these people saying that it didn't cause their cancer and that Terumo did nothing wrong. So it was a drag down fight, 6 weeks. We had to prove liability, regulatory compliance defense. We had to prove causation. And ultimately, the jury came back, and you were there. You were talking me through the waiting time, the verdict watch, as you call it. They came back with a no negligence finding, which was just, swift kick in the nuts. All right, no other way to put it. I could say gut punch to be PC, but let's be honest. This is how it felt. And we split up the case. I did liability, and the other firm, Edelson, who's great out of Chicago, did causation. And they didn't even get to the causation part. They just said no on liability. I mean, they asked some questions we couldn't answer. The jurors did. And I think they would have helped us if we could have answered the questions. But ultimately, we got defensed. I mean, it was like surreal, Dan.
It was. It is surreal still. Let's just be honest. Talking about it, no way it doesn't bring back those feelings, buddy.
Oh,
So-
I mean, we're talking to the jurors after. I mean, all these wounds reopened yesterday because we spoke to one of the jurors in our office. And that was. I'm glad we didn't do the podcast yesterday afternoon. I don't know if I could summon the courage. I get a good night's rest. Actually, it was not a good night's rest. I thought about this. Like, I got up at 4:30 thinking about the juror and everything he told us and how awful our case was. And the one positive thing he said, he's like, it was tough on negligence. We were close. Causation was an even harder sell. So I feel like I didn't fail completely. But I was up at 4 o'clock this morning thinking about it. And just like that wound is reopened. So I'm talking to them right after the verdict. You want to go get the intel from the jurors, but I could barely even hear them, man. It was like an out-of-body experience listening to them. And the defense lawyers right next to us, and they're laughing and they're happy. And, well, great job. And they're just, they're like, how did we do? Are we the best lawyers ever? And the jurors like, you're so great. And I'm just like, I mean, you saw these defense lawyers. You saw, it was just, maybe one of the hardest things, or the hardest thing I've ever had to deal with is this loss.
Yeah. No. I can imagine it because I've been on the receiving ends of some very painful experiences. But this is, it's real. It's right now. And it's like at this point in life. So it's always because it's so real right now. So this 6 weeks trial, because it was nice. So I was watching this little video from some guy named Jocko today.
Jocko Willink. Good.
Yeah, something, everything, something went wrong, good. You missed something, good. You lost a trial, good. So apparently it's good because for whatever reason, you needed to lose this trial. I know it's hard to, accept in this real world because there was, all the struggles that happened to us. And when they happen, there's nothing good about it. There's nothing feels good about it. But, when you have the perspective of a year or two, it seems to always change. You look back on that. I look back at so many things in my life that clearly didn't go. I mean, the biggest one was, never being put on staff at the trial lawyers college. To me, that was like so hurtful because I was there 12 years in a row. I was like the most committed student. I just felt like so connected to the place. But had they given me what I wanted, there would be no TLU.
Yeah.
I would have been part of some big lawsuit, and doing whatever the hell they teach over there, the kumbaya stuff. And I wouldn't be sitting here. So it's like, it hurt like crazy for all those years being rejected year after year, watching everybody I went there with on staff. But you know what? Good. Because you
Good.
know what? And all the people that, the naysayers.
The
Believe it or
naysayers.
not, some people made fun of me when I got started. Some people still do, maybe. I don't know. I don't really care. But the point is, shit happens. So either we win or we learn. So let's talk about what you learned from this experience.
Good.
Good.
If you can say the word good, it means you still got some life left in you, and you still got some fight left in you. Good. That was what it goes. Look, Jocko Willink, he's a former Navy SEAL. He writes kids' books. He's got this awesome book called The Warrior Kid. I have 3 little boys, and so 9, 7, and 3. I read that to them, and it's about just being a warrior in all aspects and overcoming adversity. And so it was helpful to hear his good speech. My friend sent it to me. A couple of friends sent it actually, and because when you're in it, you think there's nothing good that's going to come of it. I have a lot of time to reflect. It's been about 6 weeks, I think, and I think I'm finally back in the saddle, to use a Satch Oliver metaphor, back in the saddle, back on the horse, and I've had time to reflect. And I do have some takeaways. My good friend Dan said we need to talk about this. We need to process it, and you'll come away better.
Everybody loses.
Yeah.
Everybody loses.
Yeah.
And it's equally painful. And just like everybody's nervous when they stand up in front of that jury. But nobody ever wants to, these big lawyers never want to talk about the nerves and the butterflies because it's just like they're supposed to be automatic. But trust me, until you get that connection going, it ain't automatic. And, until you lost, you don't know what it feels like. But anybody that's trying cases loses. And so, and it has the same fears and insecurities. So,
Right.
But nobody wants to talk about it because it's not good for the reputation. It's not good for the ego. It's not good for whatever. And I get it, but it's good for the process of growing.
Right.
That's what it's good for. And
Right.
that's what we're doing here. So what did you learn?
Yeah. So I mean, one of the biggest takeaways I have, and I've got a lot, we won't go through all of them. One of my biggest takeaways is I think a lot of times when I would go to trial and we get these wins, obviously you don't reflect on the wins. You're like, I did everything right. So that's
Jury
why
loves me.
That's why I got 30 million, because
Everybody fucking loves me.
right. And I could have done it any better. Of course I could have, but you never reflect. So like one thing I'm thinking about is I think sometimes I'm relying too much on presentation and not enough on strategy. I go up there and I say, look, I can do a pretty good cross-examination. Are you not entertained? I can entertain the jury. I can do dramatic techniques, and that's all great. But I think I rely on that too much and wasn't focusing on the strategy of what do I need out of each witness? I'll write across with 15 topics. That's too many, especially in a case that's 6 weeks long where people have a hard time digesting all this material. I need to be laser focused. I need to map out the trial strategy, meaning what are the 5 points I want from each witness? Where can there be some overlap between the witnesses? And what is this witness going to bring that's new? Opening and closing. I mean, I thought I gave great openings and closings. I think those are the strong points. But that only means so much if by the time they get to closing, they don't believe you anymore because the evidence didn't come in the right way. Talking to the jury yesterday, he's like, look, after your opening, first couple of witnesses, I was like, how is the defense ever going to come back from that? But at the end, they did. And for some reason, this particular juror believed whenever there was a conflict, our evidence and their evidence, they believed Terumo's evidence. And that was just another gut punch to me. So I want to be more intentional about the witnesses and what points I want out of them. We had a direct Dan that went on for a day and a half, 2 days. I lost control of the witness. It was just too long. We can't do that again.
What kind of witness was that?
He was our main witness, our main engineer expert. He's amazing, but I didn't do a good enough job of keeping the points focused and narrow. And by the way, I can't speak too much because guess what? I get another swing at this thing because it's a bellwether. So we're setting a new trial next week for the next bellwether client, which is probably my client that's needs the most help. He's got the longest life ahead of him, and he's the most impaired. He's got something. He's a cancer survivor. He has something called avascular necrosis. He survived 5 years of cancer in the hospital, but then developed something called avascular necrosis, where the treatment, the steroids, cause your bones to start dying. So he's 33. He's lost a leg. He's had an ankle replaced. All of his bones and his joints are literally just evaporating. The bones are just dying. The blood flow is no longer there. So he needs us to win this. He's got a long, difficult life ahead. So maybe that was one of the reasons, we get this first one, we learn our lessons, and we're locked and reloaded, and we've now streamlined things so we can do the job on the case we cannot lose. So it's that so I can't give too much strategy away because I'm sure my friends Andrew Whitaker and Luke McFarlane are listening to this. Thank you, defense lawyers. Hey, buddies. So yes, that was one thing I learned. Another thing I learned, let's stay on that topic, witnesses. So crosses, there's the textbook cross in a class, and then there's the real world cross of like crazy witnesses. And you don't want witnesses to run away from you, but you can't do the textbook cross because this is not acting. It's the real world. But I've got to do a better job of keeping things a little tighter and really getting the points in that I want and limiting it. Don't get greedy on cross. I don't believe in the 3 points only, but like don't do 12 because no one's going to remember them. And then another thing I want to do better on cross is indirect, but cross really is really, and Mark Lanier does this, give the jury a preview. These are the 5 things we're going to talk about. It gives the jurors some cognitive ease. Okay, where
Roadmap.
this is go, roadmap, and then really do guideposts. Okay, let's talk about point number 2 here. So the jurors know how to focus on that, and they know exactly what you're trying to get out, as opposed to thinking they're going to pick up on the points you're making because you're just so entertaining. You really got to spoon feed, I think, and so I want to do a better job of that. And I've always worried about I don't beat a dead horse. I don't want to like belabor the points, and I think there are diminishing returns if you do that. But it's worse if you make so many points and don't do that enough, and no one remembers the important stuff. So I want to be more intentional about that when going through witnesses and really the thematic points that we need to hone in on. So I learned that. I do think big data is really helpful. I use big data with John Campbell on my first big 8-figure verdict. I haven't used it since because I'm too busy preparing for trial. I think that's a mistake. I think big data are better than focus groups because you get a larger sample size. Focus groups, maybe you do a 10-person focus group. Maybe you just get 10 people that hate or love your case. And what do you learn from it? You get 200 to look at it. I think you're in better shape. So I want to use big data more consistently, and I want to use it in my next trial. And look, if you have the chance to be on CVN, it's our first CVN trial. People can go watch it. It's a lot of fun. I don't suggest you watch the whole 6-week trial. Openings and closings are great, but get a shadow jury. I think the defendants had a shadow jury watching, and we did not. So we could not adjust our strategy on the fly.
Speaking of shadow juries, though, Philip Miller runs the shadow jury, whatever we call it, for every one of Satch Oliver's trials. Satch I did a case analysis with him yesterday. He just got a $140 million verdict against Kroger, and it wasn't a punitive damage; it was compensatory. And
Amazing.
so, but a lot, you know what I mean? And Philip's with him the whole time during trial, checking with the shadow jury. But that's that's a whole nother level of preparation that I've never seen anybody else do in this game, is the on the plaintiff side. So just throwing it because Philip and we present with Satch on timelines at Huntington Beach. But anyways, want to throw that in there on the
Okay.
shadow jury, because that way somebody, Satch will be the whole time. You chat a little bit with him about the shadow jury process and what they get from it, because obviously it's a big investment. That's why we have HMR Servicing as our main sponsor, because these cases are heavy duty financially, and not everybody has the resources. If they do, don't want to risk their own resources,
Right.
because ain't nothing for certain in this world. So anyways, just throwing that out there. So got to tighten up our crosses.
Yep.
Make our points.
Yep.
Make sure we have to control our runaway witnesses.
Yep.
We had a few runaway witnesses on there. You'd ask them, good morning. They go on for 10 minutes about the sun, going around the earth, and yada yada yada. That's an obviously it's an exemplar, but there was a lot of they were coached professional witnesses.
Ooh, were they ever?
Like, no, they were, and it's like look, I see it all the time, and it's like I get frustrated back there. I just want to reach it and choke the people. You know what I mean? Choke the witness.
Right.
Because like my buddy Gallipo, he's waiting on a jury, and these like this expert for this side was so full of shit, and so I'm just like watching this shit. I'm just like, because like as any trial lawyer sitting and watching anything, you're like, let me do it, let me get up there, right?
Right.
Just sitting there in the audience, I'm like, but we'll see. Maybe because yesterday the jury was split 4-4.
How do you know they
So
were
they're doing a
split 4-4? How do you know that?
They sent a note. It said we're evenly split 4-4
Oh,
on the
shit.
first question.
Oh.
So we'll see if they get either get a win. I said to my buddy Cree, I said, my dream is you get the win, like a big any verdict, because like this guy, like get a verdict, or like my dream is you get like an 8-figure verdict.
Right.
But short of that, my second dream is that you get a hung jury and I'm part of the next trial. If I'm just telling you my own person. Because like with that fucking transcript and these lying sack of shit cops, like with now with that kind of testimony out there and seeing what I saw, it's like they'll be able to really whoop their ass the next time and make it clear as fucking day. Because there was no video of the incident, just audio, so it made it much more difficult to piece together. And these cops are professional liars. You think like all they do is lie. They get on that stand, they take an oath, and they lie. It's sad, like sociopath, but they look like they're telling the truth because they're such professional liars. Most cops, not to be derogatory towards cops, but most cops are just sociopathic liars when they want to be.
Yeah, it's frustrating when you get that lying witness up there, or you get the runaway witness, because I mean, there's a lot of tactics to do that. Like some people say, just let them run and look disinterested.
Right.
Maybe that works for some people. Others say you got to
Turn your back on them.
So some people say you got to cut them off. Judge, I need to have the witness answer the question. Others say you get aggressive, and there's no right or wrong approach. It's kind of witness dependent. What you don't want to do though is lose credibility in front of the jury by being an asshole. I think that's you can't be the bully in there. For most jurors, some jurors will give you a pass because like it's his job, but there's a lot of the jurors that I think are usually the best for us, the ones that are moved by emotion. Don't want to see you become a jerk. So you've got to straddle that line of being forceful and keeping them focused and cutting them off, but not becoming the bully up there. You want them to look like the bad person by evading your answers. And so, and that's you can get better at that by reps, by doing Dan's boot camps, by mapping these things out and doing some role playing with your colleagues. So there's ways to work on it, and like everything else, we can always get better. I mean, dude, I'm excited to get back in the trial. I wasn't for a few weeks.
I am so excited. I'm so excited that I'm not even doing TLU Vegas this year. People are like, why aren't you doing Vegas? I love Vegas. It was so big. Didn't you make a lot of money from it? I'm like, it was big. It was fine. It was profitable, but that's not what life's all about too. I mean, it's a little bit about it, but it's about becoming what you want to become. And I didn't start this pursuit to become the host with the most, right? Or to run the best trial conferences. I just run the best trial conferences because it's my DNA to compete, to win.
Right.
So it's like, if I'm doing anything, I want to be the best in the world. Just like if I'm going to be doing, teaching trial skills, I want to have the best trial skills training business in the world, or you know what I mean? And have, and train lawyers to be champions, not just to go in there and survive. Right. But that's why too, I get to work with I'm so fortunate and blessed. I get to work with the greatest trial lawyers like Satch and Joe Freed and, on and on and on. And, and you coming to doing our boot camps together and learning the strategy and the skills, because it takes a combination of strategy and skills. It's not just skills. It's like you said, it's not just the performance. You got to have the strategy. And that's why, some people like Brian Panish, I could never figure out how that guy, before I got to know him, I could never figure out how he got verdict after verdict. I watched that guy, I'd be like he's gruff. He's, he not even like Nick Raleigh, you can see how well he connects, right? I'm like, he doesn't seem to be, but then you go watch him, then you understand, because he's like strategy to a whole new level. And like, he's just very likable once, you know what I mean? And like, he's got a really tough judge right now. Like this judge is like constantly chastising him, like it's like almost scolding him in the courtroom, because the judge has got a little bow tie on. So he goes, Ambrose, the judge has a bow tie. Do I need to tell you anymore? I'm like, no, because every judge ever had a bow tie is the most conservative, right-wing, like what is that? Federalist Society mopo I've ever, every one of them that wears a bow tie. Never had a pleasant judge. Never had a friendly, easygoing judge with a bow tie. That's just like the stiffness of them all. So, anyways, I digress.
Yeah.
Back to Terumo.
Go
How
ahead.
about voir dire? What would you do differently, you know, or
Yeah.
what were some of the things that, without giving away too much to the other side?
Sure. One more quick thought on the big data stuff. I mean, when Campbell runs his big data, there's no skills involved. I thought about this morning, right? It's just paper. It's like, briefs, papers. So there's no flair or skill from the trial lawyer involved in getting that big data. So if you can get like the right strategy ahead of time and then add the presentation skills to it, now you're cooking with gas. And because if you can get these if the big data is returning, X amount of dollars in verdicts without you being trustworthy, likable, persuasive, imagine how you can then amplify and exponentially increase that big data result. So I like that a lot. Jury selection.
Hold on. Let me just comment on that, though,
Yeah.
too, since you brought this back. So I think, from what I've seen on the big data, I've seen a lot of it. I haven't studied it. I wasn't in Madrid for their jury ball, but I've done a lot of programs on it. And I've seen it go, you know what I mean, where it's very on. And I've seen where people got 20 times what the big data suggested because I asked for it, totally ignored it. And where people got shit, right? So it's all over the place.
Right.
And so, because it can't take into account, like you said, it can't take into account the skill of the trial lawyer or the skill of the defense lawyer. And those are the two biggest factors when it comes to a verdict.
Right.
It's not the evidence, it's the skills. And so you got a great lawyer and you got him the great, information, great. But, most lawyers have no performance skills. They've never practiced, they've never trained in performance and connection. And it's like their first trial. And it's like but I think one thing that's extremely most valuable about it is giving the confidence. Like giving lawyers the confidence to ask for numbers that sound like they could be crazy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like you were talking about Claggett being a perfect example, you know what I mean? You're talking about watching his closing and the confidence in the number. And so I think, and I've seen it over and over, so many people hit their first 8-figure verdicts because of big data gave them this number and they just said $40 million. Like, no problem. Are you kidding me? It couldn't be any other number
Right.
with such certainty because I got the data, right? And you know what? That right there is makes it worth whatever the investment is the confidence in the number.
Right.
Because the whole game is the confidence game. I mean, the biggest part is right here between the ears. Obviously needs strategy, but confidence, strategy, and the skills. So that was my big data comment. Go on with the voir dire now.
Voir dire. So just piggybacking off that, I think it's also good for big data is good for figuring out what kind of jurors you want, you don't want. In Colorado, you usually get in 15 minutes to an hour of jury selection. In this case, the judge was kind enough to give us, I think, 90 minutes. 90 minutes for a 6-week trial. We had 1 day of hardships, where pretty much anybody who wanted out got out. There was some debate over stuff, and we kept some, but that was a whole nother bag of worms. Who should you let go for hardships? When you let so many folks go for hardships, we lost every student. We lost most people with a real job. What we kind of ended up with, for the most part, were government workers and people who were retired, and we lost a real cross section of the community. So I'm going to fight harder next time to keep more students, more young people, folks that have real jobs, because everyone's like, I can't be gone for 6 weeks. And we want a shorter trial next time. We're going to be asking for the court for 3 weeks, not 6 weeks. We're going to condense everything. We're going to streamline it. And I think that will help us get a better veneer and cross-section of the actual community, as opposed to folks that can leave their job because the government can't fire them or they're retired. So I think that was a big lesson. It doesn't really relate to voir dire, but still jury selection. So I want to cut the trial in half. I think John Campbell was saying they've been seeing these big, long trials end up in defense verdicts because people just get fatigued, they get worn down, and by the time you're done with your case halfway through, and in the next 3 weeks defense does their case, jurors have forgotten everything you said in week 1. It's just too long of a time period. Shoot for a shorter time period that will hopefully get us a better jury veneer. And then in jury selection, I spend a lot of time building rapport and getting them used to large damages. And I think I do a really good job of both those things. And it's a lot of fun. I think it's my best voir dire ever. It's not on CVN, so you can't see it. But we're reflecting. What could I have done better? I could have spent more time probing regulatory compliance. Could have spent more time probing some of their defenses and getting more pointed questions about certain things. Now, would that have changed anything? I mean, the people we struck, we had to strike. It's like you only get so many strikes. They were allowed to keep on the jury panel a former Terumo employee who thought that the company did a great job, and that if this was a car race, Terumo would be starting a little ahead of us. So, I mean, it
That wasn't a cause challenge?
wasn't a cause challenge. So we had to get rid of some people. I don't know. I mean, if I found out some people were worse on regulatory compliance, would I have gotten rid of them instead of the folks we did? I don't know. But I had people who wouldn't award large damages. I mean, we're asking for $500 million. I can't have those people on the jury. So, I mean, would it have changed stuff? Maybe. I mean, I wish we had a little more time, but this is the learning episode for me. I want more probing and direct questions on the defenses. I think that we could spend a little more time on that. And also, in the jury system in Colorado, the judge gave us the full day, which is great, even though it was only 90 minutes each. But when we did get people struck for cause, which we did, the alternates would come up, the fill-ins, and we got 3 minutes with each fill-in. Until yesterday, I talked to one of the alternates yesterday. Until speaking to him, I didn't know how bad he was for us because I didn't get a chance to talk to him. I had 3 minutes. Like, well, how do you feel about money damages? It's like boom, boom, boom. So asking or maybe reserving some of my 90 minutes, and I did 60 minutes of Voir. My co-counsel, Nick Rosinia, who's great, and did causation. And he had a really uphill battle. Causation is really hard in these cases. I mean, that's really where they put a lot of their defense in because people are breathing in, small amounts over a long time. They're like, that couldn't hurt anybody. The dose is the poison. The poison is the dose. You need to have a lot of dose. But anyway, maybe take our 90 minutes and reserve some for the people that come up out of the box after a for-cause challenge. Those are my two Voir takeaways.
All right. Well, those sound like worthwhile takeaways. I think you covered anything else to talk about regarding Terumo because we have we got TLU Huntington Beach to talk about. So
yeah, I got a few other thoughts. I mean, one of the things I want to talk about, I think today was the first time I woke up missing trial. You came and visited us, Dan. We had a great time at trial. You gave me some great advice on crosses, helped me tighten them up moving forward. I mean, you did come see the most difficult witness, the one I was the most concerned about, and that was just the one you show up for. I'm like, great, Dan's going to see me. But you can see the rest of them on CVN. It was a very challenging one, but just talking about the trial process itself, I think is helpful for me to talk about and for others to hear. Maybe is just I think it's so important. And there's the takeaway here. Number one, don't do 80% of the witnesses. That's just too much. I had great co-counsel. I should have relied on them more. The lawyers in my firm should have relied on them more. I wanted to do it all because I wanted to control everything. And if you're doing 80% of the witnesses like I was doing, it just doesn't give you enough time to prepare for the next one and have everything locked and loaded and redialed it in.
And to rest your brain a little bit too. I mean,
Yeah.
trial is like, even if you're just just being in the courtroom, even not doing witness, at the end of the day, it's exhausting. Like it's just the pressure of that courtroom, it bleeds energy out of me. I'm sure it does. I mean, just being there, right?
Yes.
So, and if you have to perform and be there and be like getting ready the next day, my God, it's it's a lot. It's a lot.
It's a lot. So don't take on too much. Strategically pick the witnesses you want to do, and work with your co-counsel to make sure everyone's on the same page for the witnesses that they're doing and that you're not doing. And I think that would put my mind more at ease. So that's one thing I took away. I love getting a trial house, getting a hotel. We had a house this time, and just making sure you got a good place to exercise. You got good, healthy, clean food. Every morning I'm in a great routine. I wake up early. I caffeinate. I pray. My faith is a huge part of how I get through these things. I feel like when I'm in trial, I can only do it through God's help. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, Philippians 4:13. And so I know sometimes I got to get out of the way and just let the Spirit, guide me, because otherwise I can't do it on my own. So for me, and that's just me personally, having a good routine for exercise, eating healthy, prayer, and meditation, contemplation, and the ability to have a good workstation to get everything done. Like you said, Dan, it's just draining. So you need to be hitting on all cylinders. And so whatever it is for you, those are things that are important to me. But whatever it is that keeps your, I had a cold plunge, but never got a chance to use it because it froze. It was outside. That was not the smartest play on our part. But whatever it is that gives you peace and joy, don't give that up for trial. I didn't know how I was going to get through 6 weeks. I had done many 2-week trials before, and it took every ounce of energy I had. And I talked to you about this ahead of time. How are we going to get through 6 weeks of trial? I have, 8 witnesses a week. Sometimes it was me doing every witness for 5 days in a row. How will I get through it? And for me, it was those things. It was prayer, preparation, rest, and exercise, and eating healthy. And I'm here to tell you one of my favorite quotes from the movie The Edge with Alec Baldwin and Anthony Hopkins. There's this bear.
The bear movie?
The bear movie.
The Bear.
If you've seen it in my TLU lectures, I always show the clip. where there's bears hunting them. And Alec Baldwin wants to give up. He just wants to die. And he's like, what can we do, Charles? The bear's stalking us, for Christ's sakes. He's killed one of our friends. And Anthony Hopkins goes, you want to die out here, don't you? And there's this moment where Anthony Hopkins gives him this speech, this pep talk. He's like, a man can kill a bear. It's been done before. He's like, what one man can do, another can do. What one man can do, another can do. And he hypes him up and he hypes him up. He's like, that's right. And he makes Alec Baldwin say it. What one man can do, another can do. And after he does this mantra about 15 times, Anthony Hopkins goes, that's right. Because today, I'm going to kill the motherfucker. And so I just love that, because I've seen these great trial lawyers, Nick Rowley, Sean Claggett, all these guys do these long trials. I'm like, well, one lawyer can do, another can do. And I'm here to tell you, you can do it. You find the things that bring you joy and peace. Don't lose those out. Don't lose out on those when you're in trial, and put that on hold, because this is still your life. This is 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks of your life. You got to live the way you want, and you'll be the best version of you as a trial lawyer if you can be the best version of who you are, and you don't lose that identity. So let me get on my soapbox for this one little speech here, but I think it's important for everyone to find that and to do that. I'm telling you, everyone can do it if you stay true to yourself and you stay authentic, because the most important thing, I think, in a trial of all the stuff we're talking about is being authentic in front of the jury. And if you're not in a good headspace, and if you're not being your authentic self outside the courtroom, there's no way you can be your authentic self inside the courtroom. So that's just my pitch and my words of encouragement through a tough loss, that it can be done.
So let me just comment now on
Please.
authenticity, because everybody talks about authenticity. And, the whole trial lawyers college spent 12 years talking about authenticity,
Yes.
and I never really understood it, because after doing more work on all this, though, I've come to the conclusion that authenticity is a result. It is a destination that is worked towards. Nobody is their authentic self when they stand up in front of a jury, early on, because they're scared shitless. And you can't be your authentic self if you're nervous, if your voice is cracking, if the pressure affects your brain. But authenticity comes from being relaxed. Like, you watch Nick Rowley in trial or Brian Panish, they're the most relaxed ones in the court. Judge yells at them, it doesn't affect them. They're like, yes, Your Honor, I will move on. Yes, Your Honor, it's not a problem, whatever you say, because they're calm. And that calmness comes from confidence. And that confidence comes from preparation. And they may not prepare for a month for that trial like you or I would have, but they've had so much success and have worked on their skills over the course of 100 to 150 trials, working with really great lawyers a lot of the times too. So they're constantly getting better. And so that's why they're very calm and relaxed, because if somebody's all nervous and shaking up there and voice is cracking and that's their authentic self, wrong. Nobody's ever going to follow you. You're not prepared. And, and people, how did I get there? You get there by training.
Yep.
You get there by constantly training, pushing yourself every day to get better, to train, to get up every chance you get to get in front of people, to present whatever, then you get more comfortable. It's like at TLU, being on the stage, even if you're not speaking. But every time you speak at TLU, every time somebody gets on that stage as a presenter, that's trial lawyering right there. That's getting up in front of a group, having to explain complex ideas to that group, keep the audience's attention, make sure, monitoring that. Are they with me? Am I boring them? Do I have to move on here? That's what we have to do as presenters. When we're presenting these CLEs, it's the same thing as in trial, but it's just constant preparation. That leads to calmness, not psyching yourself up. That's what I'm saying. The other stuff's good. You got to keep balance, but you got to train. People don't want to, people call me like a month before trial, like, oh, I want to get ready for trial. I'm like, it's a little late.
Right.
If you want to start working on voir dires right now, start doing it, because I don't want to train. I don't want to practice. I just want to work on my case. I'm like, you cannot train on your own case. It does not work. Too much of your bandwidth is used up on the facts and the evidence. You have to train on set small pieces that are very short, a minute or two, that take the basic moves so that these patterns become part of you, that they will reflect in everything you do. But that's where the authenticity, confidence, and calmness comes from, is training. Just need to put that in there. All right.
I love it. I couldn't agree more.
The highlight of TLU for me was having the opportunity to network with attorneys from out of state.
TLU's been amazing. I'm so glad I came. It was one of the most inspiring events I've been to. Great networking, great food. It's been amazing. I can't wait for next year.
let's talk about TLU Huntington Beach, because we are going to be doing some serious teaching at this conference. And I'm very stoked for it because I have some new things that we've never done before. And one of them is the live voir dire track. So we're going to have, it's going to be in a smaller room. It's only going to hold about, a room that only holds about 40 people. And so we're going to have a focus jury up there, and we're going to have a camera on the focus jury, and we're going to have a camera. And so my nephew Harrison, who also has he's a lawyer, but also has a focus group company called Foresight. So he is going to be in charge of getting us all of our jurors, and he uses Indeed. So it's like, it's a good, you know what I mean? It's not like the Craigslist, people show up, no teeth, don't have a driver's license, haven't showered in 4 days. Like, I'll be your juror, $100, freaking great. You know, so to be like, you know, so the way it's going to work though, is like you have each lawyer, and you're one of them, is going to have a case. So, and with case specific facts, like I just got off the Zoom with Joe Freed. He's got a trucking case. Guy didn't have a helmet on. Guy got, you know, had drugs in his system, right? The things that these, you know, have to deal with, the issues of the toughness of the case. If you're a trucking lawyer, you know, if you handle motorcycle cases, so you really, you know, specialize in premises cases. So we're going to use one of your past premises cases. We're going to talk about that for a sec.
Yep.
And then we're going to do a 2-hour voir dire on it. Even though you only normally, or like hour and a half to 2 hours, but you could also use part of that time to do an opening statement, you know, 20, 30-minute opening on that case. So that way we have, you know, both the lawyer and the jury on the camera for the course. We have to TLU on demand. And, but that way too, whoever signs up for the class, you'll meet with them beforehand, kind of go over the case so everybody knows what it's about, go over the issues that are relevant to this case and how you think about discussing them, how you think about framing and reframing them, so that people can follow your process, right, before you get there. And then, you know, giving them a past transcript or two of voir dires so they can see how, you know, if they read it and see how you go about, you know, conducting voir dire. And then when we get there, they're going to do, like I said, 1.5 hours to 2 hours of voir dire live. And the last hour is going to be an analysis of what you did and a discussion with the group. That's why it's a very small group, just like a courtroom. You don't have courtrooms that hold 400 people unless you're in a federal court, and they don't get any voir dire there anyway, so it doesn't matter, right? So it's going to be realistic to, you know, because you're going to be doing this on premises. Joe Freed's going to do it on trucking. Maxie Shear is going to do a trucking case. Ben Rabinovitz is going to do a wrongful death case. I'm not sure what kind it is, but Pat Salvi, your buddy who you introduced me to, he's going to do it on medical malpractice.
Great.
Nick Rowley's doing it on TBIs, and Mike Alder on auto spine case. So I know we forgot somebody there, but I can't remember everything. Anyways, got a big lineup. So what the case that you're going to be doing the voir dire on, what case is it?
Yeah, so everything I'm doing is premises related. There's pretty much all my big trial wins. I mean, I've done trucking as well, but a lot of premises stuff. So the last win we had, we're going to look over the toxic tort loss, and we'll go back to it was a $30 million federal court explosion case. It was a fracking site, oil and gas site. As you know the case very well, Dan, we've done a case analysis on it. But in any event, so at a fracking site, there's these big, they're called frac tanks. They're about the size of a mobile home. Same size, same idea, same concept. And they hold oil and gas and water. And my guy, 33-year-old well site supervisor, for those who do oil and gas, pretty much, you know, the guy who's running the site from a worker's perspective, he hears some noises from one of the tanks. So him and his coworker go up to investigate. They go on top of the tank. So they're about 10, 12 feet in the air. They climb up the ladder, and they're hearing these noises. And my guy asks his coworker to turn off the valve on the tank next to him, which ends up saving everyone's life because it cuts off the gas supply. But after he turns off the valve, the tank that my client is on explodes, shooting Steve Strawn into the air about 30 feet and then landing another 30 feet away from the tank that he was on. And it resulted in several orthopedic injuries, an open book pelvic fracture, which, you know, it's like your pelvis opening up like a book, about the worst thing that can happen to you, broken legs, et cetera, spent months in rehab, ended up losing one of his legs after severe nerve injuries, and just a sweetheart of a guy. And so this is a 2-week trial. It was hotly contested. So this is how we're gonna do the voir dire, and the voir dire will focus on all the things that we focus on, you know, everything from starting with brutal honesty, which we stole from Nick Rowley. It's just such a great icebreaker, and building rapport. You know, I memorize everyone's names in jury selection, which sounds like a parlor trick, but I'm telling you, people love it. I mean, they come up I've had jurors come up at like the lunch break. Thank you for memorizing our names. It really shows that you care. I mean, it's really, really, really powerful. And then we'll go through all the topics, everything from starting with tort reform, frivolous lawsuits. Then we go through money for medical bills, money for pain and impairment, burden of proof, and circling back to money. How much is too much? Doing some anchoring, teaching folks I've stolen the anchoring from like 8 different people and then crafted it to my own. So it's a really fun and I think a really effective tool. In fact, the juror yesterday who came in, I was like, did the amount we asked for trouble you? Did that like weigh into your liability decision? He's like, no. He's like, you did a great job. And this guy didn't like me. You did a great job. He told me he goes, just to give me some credibility with this compliment. He goes, Kurt, he goes, your theatrics. He's like, I didn't need them, especially the story at the end. I said, what story? What are you talking about? What story didn't you like? He's like, your briefcase. Didn't like the briefcase. The briefcase close. I'm not going to stop doing the briefcase close because this juror didn't like it.
He's got no taste in closing arguments.
Well, I mean,
taste.
The thing about the briefcase, right? If you don't have them on liability and causation, they
Right,
ain't gonna
it's
like the
corny.
briefcase, right?
No.
They're like, you're just trying to trick me with your theatrical emotional appeal. I have no emotion. It doesn't work because they did nothing wrong. So anyway, he didn't like everything I did, but he did like how I introduced the concept of money damages. And I mean, I talk about, billions of dollars, government contracts, the Raptor jet, what that costs. And then we kind of work down from numbers to the number we're really going to ask for. And so I found it very effective in warming people up to this amount of damages you're going to ask for. So we'll go through that. Then we'll go through case specific voir dire, the things I was talking about a little earlier, and really drill into how folks feel about regulatory compliance, about worker safety, and whether workers should feel like who has the responsibility for guaranteeing the safety? Is it people's own company? Is it other companies? The whole case turns on whether these frac tanks that were delivered to the site were delivered with defects in them, whether they had holes in them that allowed oxygen in, which created this explosive environment, which then allowed the explosion to happen. And so in that case, we had to pin it on the tank company that delivered these tanks. And they were blaming everyone else. They were blaming my guy. They're like you see in premises cases. Your guy wasn't being safe enough being on top of the tank. His company wasn't safe enough with all the regulations. His company and other companies on site should have checked these tanks for holes. And so that's what you deal with in a lot of premises cases is these non-party defenses, comparative fault. We didn't create the dangerous condition. And even if we did, it should have been guarded against by everybody else other than us. So we're going to dig into all that kind of stuff, which is reapplicable to everyone's premises case, because that's what you have to prove in a premises case, right? A danger, did they protect against a danger they knew or should have known about? And so you've got to voir dire on what the defendant should have known, on safety regulations, policies and procedures. Dig into that. What do you expect a company to do if they're delivering tanks that could potentially explode? What are the types of maintenance you would want to see on that? What are the type of inspections you would want to see? And we'll dig into all those things for this case that are applicable to all premises cases, because these are the issues that we deal, we do electrocutions, we do slip and falls, we do dangerous conditions in grocery stores, we do dangerous doors. All these kinds of cases all deal with the same kind of, it wasn't us, we couldn't have appreciated the danger, everyone else should have taken care of it. So we'll dig into all that stuff.
All right. And in addition to the voir dire, you're also going to be doing a masterclass on premises liability. And so what is that class? Because at first you're going to start off on that one with, of course, case selection.
Case selection.
I know it all starts with case selection. So how do you go about deciding? Somebody brings you a case, because I'm sure you see a lot of cases. And so on a premises case, what kind of things are you looking for in deciding whether you want to put your blood, sweat, and gold into a case?
Yeah. So for me, and when I was an up-and-coming lawyer and I hear about case selection, I get frustrated. It's like, well, you, fancy trial lawyer, have the luxury of picking the very best cases. Me, young trial lawyer, I just want a case. So I'm mindful of that, right? It's not going to be like, here's how you get the case that I'll take. No, like truly, like what is best for everybody out there? And I think for a premises case, I mean, we're talking about criteria. It's pretty much twofold. We'll dig into it more. Is other the injuries justify it? Because it's going to be expensive. It's going to be hard. It's no rear end collision. So you got to make sure that the damages are there. Or there's a way you can build them up. So we always require surgeries. I mean, there's criteria for what our firm will take, because we have lots of lawyers to feed, and there's a criteria for what I will take, which are very different. I'm looking for catastrophic damages, but the rest of if we're taking it on with another lawyer and co-counseling, and that's great. But for cases we're just signing up individually, I mean, we got to have a surgery. I think you got to have damage, some damages that will support it. So that's important. And then you're looking at the liability, and can you really prove this? Were there OSHA reports? What is the company's history? Ideally, you're looking for some really bad facts out there, some as Satch would call them, some mad facts that will make the jury mad. I love those. Those are great. I don't require 5 because it's a lot. But if you can find a few, that would be great. It's really digging in, and what we like to do is sign up the case and then investigate, bring on experts early, consult, and that way you can get your preservation letters out to preserve evidence. You bring in your engineers very early on, and before you pour, I think we spent $700,000 on that fracking explosion. You spend $10,000, $15,000 to make sure there's enough teeth there. So we'll dig into all that.
All right. And then as far as like experts, when you look at a case like this, how do you go about thinking about what experts do you need and finding them? Because especially like this fracking case, as far as I know, this was your first fracking case.
Yeah.
And I was always like, I remember going over to your house a few years ago and you have like the study and going back there and you got all these books opened up and, like you're reading all this shit and like, what are you doing? Like, oh man, I'm learning about fracking. I'm learning about this. I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
that's a lot to learn. So, it's like from somebody like regular people like me, it hurts my head having to like, basically become an expert in something for one case. And
Right.
so, part of the process though is finding experts that not just know their shit, but I think are willing to teach you, spend the time to teach you all the stuff that you need to know in this particular area. But so how do you go about, in some new an area, especially if you're not familiar with this kind of, it's not just like a regular premises slip and fall. You use the same expert on, there's some people that, like in LA, everybody uses this guy, Brad Everett. He's got this, every time this is premises, this is a guy. But so how do you go about finding, especially in like a difficult case where you're not that familiar with the, you haven't done that type of case before?
Right. No, great question. We just got brought on a case where they were doing constructing these houses. Then the first, or either like townhouses, and the first townhouse was constructed, and the stairs were okayed for everybody. The stairs weren't finished; it wasn't like carpeted, but they were ready to go. And our master plumber goes up on the second set of stairs, and he's I think 400 pounds, and the stairs fall and go through 2 floors, and he just gets crushed. And so, and it's a great case. A lawyer here brought it to me. And now we're got to go find a stair expert. There's the expert you want, or an oil and gas case. There's the expert you're going to pay the big money to. That's going to be great at testifying and will be polished. And you need those guys because they know you want someone who's litigation savvy to some extent. But you also want someone who's going to, like you said, teach you, and someone who's accessible, who's not going to charge you $700 an hour just to talk to them. And so we will go like literally call up companies, staring companies, knock on doors, or find a connection to someone we know with someone who's never been an expert and pitch them and be like, listen, we need help understanding. We need to learn this. These folks are usually very willing to help. They're not that expensive because they don't know that you can charge $1,000 an hour in litigation. There's this electrical expert that a lot of people on your show have used, Mike Jones. Giorgio used him in his case that he got this big electrocution on. And I kind of discovered him in my first big 8-figure electrocution case. And he's still he goes around the country now. Brian Lacine hired him out in Chicago. A guy who lost one of the ETO trials, my brethren. And
you got a special bond with him.
That's right.
Special group of guys that got defense on the ETOH trial.
The loser circle, the League of Gentlemanly Losers. And so Mike Jones, he still charges like $250 an hour. I'm like, Mike, you can charge a lot more than that. People really need you. But you get these. I don't say they're green, but they're not savvy. They're not sophisticated experts, and you learn a lot from them. You bring them in early, and you have them teach you. And then you know what? If they may end up being your testifying expert, which is even better, if you can kind of get them where they need to be. So we'll go into all that stuff.
Great. And then as far as approaching the discovery and depositions, what are your thoughts on that in these kinds of cases?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a case-by-case basis, but we'll dig into this using my case as an exemplar. But we call them 30B6. Everyone knows 30B6s. I guess in California they call them PMK, person most knowledgeable. And it's we usually start with those 30B6s, and so we'll go into how to draft these notices. And there's always this more topics, and the defense will complain, "There's too many. We can't get ready for it." If you put not enough topics, and they're like, "This wasn't specific enough." You can't win no matter what you do. We'll work through depot notices and really hammering out the topics, and that's so important because you want to get the person most knowledgeable, and if they don't know their shit, then that's great. The company has no opinion on it. So we'll dig through all of that. We'll talk about witness and deposition order. We like to do 30B6s first because we know that they're going to prepare the most. So, and there's always exceptions to this rule, but generally speaking. And so if you take a bunch of fact witnesses first, then the 30B6, well, 30B6 is going to study those depots. They're going to get paid to do it. They're the professional witness, and they're going to make sure that they have crafted the perfect answer. And you saw some of these in trial, Dan. The perfect answer that accounts for all the testimony. I'd rather do that first so they don't have the time to do all the homework, and then dig into the fact witnesses who aren't going to be as sophisticated, that aren't going to read the 30B6 and memorize stuff, and then really try and get them to start finding some conflicts and some inconsistencies, or what we call in the industry as lies, between them and the 30B6. And so we'll talk about that strategy and how to get all the evidence you need before the depot. There's this phenomenal speaker who, I forget his name, who talks about depositions are trial. I don't know if you know that guy.
Is he a cowboy?
Yeah, he wears a hat, very charismatic, handsome guy, huge verdicts. What's his name?
He's got a weird name.
It
Weird.
rhymes with
Sounds like a sack of potatoes.
Matt Oliver. Yeah,
Satch.
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 Yes,
He's your guy. Cowboy.
Satch is my boy. Love Satch. And to make sure you have the right documents, because you take a great depot, case is going to settle. So we'll go into all that and how to get and how to use the documents as well in a premises case, so you really know how to get the admissions you need, the evidence you need, and what I find, except from this last trial, apparently I have a story on that. What I find works the best in trial, we talk about what wins cases. One of the things I think wins cases is just showing the defendants and their witnesses to be liars. And so
that's what drives verdicts.
Right.
But you have to show that they're lying, not just making a mistake.
Exactly.
That's why cross is so critical, and people I see it over and over and over. Really experienced trial lawyers not laying foundations, not wanting to take the time to put in all the foundations of everything that they should have done and known before we get to the fucking heart of the stuff that we want to talk about, because it puts it in perspective, and it's like in these civil rights cases, these cops all get together before they get to have to give a statement. So these people, after the shooting, they all got together in the conference room, talk. Oh, we don't know about what. We just talked about it a little bit. We were chatting. Like, I was traumatized. Yeah, you were traumatized because somebody murdered somebody in front of you. I bet that was traumatic for you. Whereas, and then they don't give a witness statement for a month. And then they all have a lawyer when they're giving the statement. Whereas they take the family members of this poor man who was slain and they interview him immediately to start to, before they have a time to even think, and they just killed this guy's brother. Whereas every officer is trained to properly interview witnesses, that when they go to a scene, you separate the witnesses and get each person's statement individually, so the witness they can't hear each other, so they can't unintentionally contaminate each other's versions or testimony or memory, or they can't collude if they were dishonest and intentionally collaborate to get a coherent story. And so, but that's the way they're trained. But what do they do for themselves? And this is quote unquote a homicide investigation, right? Somebody died here. They don't know it was justified until they do an investigation. It may be murder, but they don't approach it that way. And sure enough, at the scene, they have their civil administrator because they know something's coming, right? And so juxtaposing how they're trained to do it and how they do it when it's their own people. That's what I mean by laying foundations with just the witness and the expert. So then he's going to say, oh, so, but you do treat everybody the same. Oh yeah. But then when the jury gets pissed off, right? Because they treat one side so protective, the fucking cops, and the other side, it's like lay them out to rest. Anyways, so that's what I mean by laying foundations, taking the time. So that way, when you show it, it's like, okay, this is really bullshit. Anyways, foundations. Got to lay foundations.
I love it. And by the way, just a quick note. We've been bashing police. Just like lawyers, there are bad cops and there are bad lawyers. Lawyers that lie, cheat, and steal. Maybe we know some of them. And there are cops that do that. but they're not all bad. I have a lot of
No,
friends
no,
that are
no,
police
no. Like,
officers, and
dude,
they keep us safe.
dude,
And
like, what? What's
I
going? You know what I mean? Like,
right,
just like all prosecutors are bad. Like,
right.
generally, don't feel sorry for prosecutors or police officers, but like our fine president just firing all these people without any notice. It's like, oh, they're not ambitious. I'm like, you don't want ambitious people doing government work, okay? It's very like an ambitious cop. You want an ambitious cop pulling you over? No, of course not. You want an ambitious? No, you want a disciplined person who's following the freaking rules, who goes to work and is proud of their role in society and having a civil society, not somebody who's trying to make a name for themselves. So, no, I'm all up, especially these days. We see all these, all these bullshit pardons. It makes me more about law and order than I've ever been as a former criminal defense lawyer. It's like when he's pardoning every criminal under the sun who has money, and all these financial fraud crimes. Like, it's just disgusting. But I digress.
So yeah,
So
so
I'm a supporter of the police. Hopefully we all do our jobs and we got law and order, and just the justice system survives the next 4 years.
we all have to do our
That's all
part.
I'm hoping.
We all have to do our
We
part.
all got to do our part.
So
We all gotta do our
so last point in the depots. What I do for trial, and I know others do this. I've never seen it. I know they all do. I know Steve Barzarian does it, and I know Satch does it. These depots, you're creating your depot clips. Now I use them differently than Satch. I'm not as talented as Satch to convince judges to let me just play all the depot clips in the beginning. I've never been able to do that. I'm still trying. Colorado's just tough on that. I try, and they always say no. So what I use them as impeachment clips for the most part. And so I cut from these depots, which we'll talk about how to do this and get the answer you need. And it's not rocket science. It just takes a lot of work. I think I cut 2,000 depot clips for this trial, and maybe we played 30 of them to show them that they were liars. Now, usually that works, right? They say something on the stand that's completely different than what they told you under oath, and everyone's like, what a liar. But I can tell you yesterday, sometimes you're just going to get the wrong jurors for your case. And the juror yesterday told me, he's like, well, I saw these clips. If they were saying one thing in the depot and one thing in trial, I didn't know which one to believe, so I didn't believe either and just disregarded that. But they were lying, man. I didn't fight with the juror, but I was just like, this was not the juror. He was an alternate, so he didn't deliberate, so that was good. He was very nice. So yes, we'll work on that and how to get those depot clips and the kind of admissions and rules of the road that you need in a premises case.
Okay, so opening statement. What are your thoughts on that in the old premises case?
It's a lot of diffusing. Again, not rocket science that you should bring up every bad fact you can think of an opening statement. It better come out of your mouth first. And so it's twofold, and we'll walk through the strategy and the order that I like to do. I've stolen it all from my favorite Roman counsel or an orator and trial lawyer, Cicero. I used to do a lecture at TLU how to use Cicero's opening argument techniques that he used 2,000 years ago. So I kind of follow that kind of guideline, and it's pretty simple. We'll go through it, but it's really painting the facts in the worst light for the defendant and making them out to be the bad guy. They're not going to understand all the science in opening. They're clearly not going to remember all your points, but they're going to come away with a feeling. And so you want to generate that feeling about how the defendant, if their defense is, we didn't know this condition was dangerous, really planting all the seeds of why they should have been looking for it. Or if there's something they couldn't guard against, just really first third of the opening is really digging in and creating that very first impression of the defendant's bad character, bad nature, bad behavior. Second 2/3 is explaining the causation. If it's slip and fall, not as important, but if it's any kind of worksite injury, we go through that. We don't really explain. We plant seeds on causation and bolster our experts' kind of credibility so they can trust them. And then after that, we diffuse all the things they're going to hear in a very calm, rational way. And then at the very end, we talk about our client. So we'll go through one of my openings and really dig through that so we can show, all the slides. We use a lot of slides. I've gone back and forth. When my first 8-figure verdict, I had no slides. In my last one, I had 100 slides. The beginning was too few, at the end was too many. And there's a happy medium. And in this toxic tort case we just did, I think I hit it pretty good with about 60 slides. And I think the trick as I'm evolving, slideshows can be really helpful. We've had jurors compliment us afterwards in trucking cases. Thank you for the slides. They helped us understand. We all learn in different ways. But I think there's a cost to slides, and that you lose that, as you would call it, Dan, that storyteller trance that you want people to get into. And you just
Connection.
the connection. Now just looking at the slides, you're reading off this. They're no good. So there's a real happy medium. We'll talk about that. And, you blank the screen. You have a controller. You don't want them looking at the screen. You blank your slideshow. There's focus on you. And you find the connection points within the slides to develop that and to really tell the story. We'll go through all that.
From all I've seen, I think it's real important to not have any slides up, nothing visuals for the first part of the opening, the first 5 to 10 minutes as you're getting that connection. So you're the only focus. You're getting that eye contact. You're ramping up that eye contact. You're ramping up how much of a chunk you give each person. And, just getting that initial connection so they're interested in you, most importantly, and the story you want to share. And then, now that we're connected, they trust the storyteller. Let us tell them the story of what happened. But so many people, as soon as they stand up, they got a slideshow. It says, Jones versus Smith.
Oh,
And it's like, what the fuck? What a waste. Like, they don't know what case we're here for. Opening statement. Like, no shit. To me, that's just garbage. But once I have my own 8-figure versus Zaner, I'll have more credibility as an expert in this thing.
you're
Right now, I'm all theory. I get it. I'm all theory right now. I'm putting it into practice, though. Let me ask you this question about witness sequencing.
Oof.
So how do you strategize about how you pick the first witness out of the box and kind of order your witnesses? Put them in what order we put them in.
This is candidly the most stressful part of trial for me, is the witness order. I labor over it. Sometimes I'm happy when I have an out and expert's like, I can only show up this day so that I can just plug them in and work around them, because I want it to be perfect. And I was talking to my team about this because we couldn't do it over a 6-week trial, but we have over a 1-week trial. We make this trial like a movie. We captivating people. Everything is scripted from day 1 to day 7, and it's flawless. We've been able to do that. We couldn't do it over 6 weeks. We lost days. We lost the case. We lost points. So we obviously didn't do it, and it's okay. A movie script is written ahead of time. They have takes. They have cuts. You can't make it like a movie, but you can sure try, and you got to deliver that if you can. And so the witness order is so important. Generally, I start with a neutral, and my buddy Zach Mandel, his dad's the Inner Circle. They're both great trialers. Mark Mandel, they have a completely different theory. There's no wrong or right theory. They think you put your best expert up first and educate the jury. Primacy, recency. For me, other than this loss, I've had a lot more success either putting up a neutral witness, eyewitness to the fact, who people have every reason to trust, or more likely, usually I go with the defendant's witnesses. I usually call for the first 2 or 3 witnesses. I don't always start with a 30B6. I usually go with some fact witnesses, some higher level folks, and then I go into the 30B6, because what I want to do, I don't want to educate the jury too much first. I want them to be upset. I want them to be shocked at what the defendants have done. I want them to, the first memories they're forming on day 1, day 2, that the defendants are lying, that they're not telling the truth. We use that to the deposition impeachment clips, well thought out crosses. And so we do liability first. We do their witnesses first. Then we go to our experts to plug in the holes and make sense of what they just heard from all the liability fact witnesses. And then we start sprinkling in, some damages stuff. We sprinkle in some called groaners, right? Friends of the plaintiffs.
You're the only one that calls them groaners, by the way.
Yeah,
I've talked to a lot of trial lawyers around the country, a lot. And groaners is unique to you. Maybe it's a Colorado
Maybe
thing.
it is, because they groan for the plaintiff, right?
Oh, I get it. I get where your groaner comes from, buddy. I don't have to. But thank you for explaining to me, just in case
Well, if I'm the only one who uses it, maybe the people don't know the groaning concept.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. All right.
So we sprinkle in the groaners. That's a way to introduce the client, because ultimately, and there's so many things that drive verdicts, they have to like the plaintiff. They have to want to help this person. And so sometimes you have unlikable plaintiffs. How do you solve that? You save them for the very end, and you bring in people that are likable that can talk about the plaintiff. So we start sprinkling in damages, people throughout, but we focus on liability, and then we get to causation, and then heavy damages at the end. Now they're mad at the defendants. Now they understand why it happened, and now they're starting to get to know your client. So, okay, now how much do we have to pay them? Then you bring in your life care planners. You bring in your economists, and you finish with that. And we still finish with the plaintiff, even if they're a really good plaintiff. And the fracking explosion guy was amazing. If you can finish with him or at least end the week on him, for the Friday witnesses are so important. If it's a 2-week trial or more, sending them home with something that they're really going to care about, that comes into factor. So we'll talk about all that in the witness order.
And so you have to practice in the deposition. You practice in motion hearings. You practice at the grocery store. That's why you have a family. You practice on them. You have to keep the skill up or it erodes. It's simple as that.
Somebody give us an overview of this case.
Or I call wowing it. And what I mean by wisdom of the wise is, why are we still right in spite of this fact?
These are just some of the clips when I was prosecutor 10 years ago, remember?
About 11 o'clock at night, and he leaves this message. I got a brilliant idea. Every conversation he starts, I have a brilliant idea.
But welcome, everybody. We've got a good crowd here today.
Let's talk about closing argument. How do you put together, how do you think about the structure of closing? You got all this stuff. First of all, when do you start thinking about your closing argument? That's the first thing I want to ask you.
I started thinking about it when I write my opening, because when I write my opening, I want my closing to mirror that. Mark Lanier says your closing should pretty much be all your opening slides again, so you can show them that everything you said was going to happen did happen. That gives you some credibility. I don't show them all my slides, but I have that in mind. So I start thinking about it, before when I write my opening. And all the evidence is going to come in. And, I have generally a formula of how I do it. And we'll go through the formula. And you hit the nail on the head. The first 5-10 minutes of closing is me just talking to them. And that's like the best part before I'm burdened by my slides. Maybe I'll start using less slides because I miss having those moments. And so it's all jury empowerment in the beginning. I talk to them I'm standing behind my clients. And I talk about jury selection and all this great empowerment stuff, some Carl Bettinger things. I use 12 heroes, one voice. And we start with empowerment. And that's a good 5 minutes. And then the structure is, then we go through liability and just like the opening for the most part. And the defenses, we sprinkle in some new stuff. We see how the evidence has come in. We create some new slides. And one of the things I did that I like to do, and I'm always toying with doing more of it, is in this last trial is I put up, there were so many witnesses. So a 6-week trial, they got to remember what happened. I put up the picture of the witness and I'd be like, and what did this person tell you? And I'd summarize the 4 things that I want them to remember. And I know that if you're on CVN, you could play the clip. I didn't want to play the clips of what they said. I think that took up too much time and from the CVN feed, and it would take away from the storytelling aspect. But you could put up a picture of them on CVN with the clip up there. I know Sean Claggett does that, but I just put up the picture and tell them what I want them to remember. So I'll go through summation of the evidence. I'll go through the key witnesses, and then I'll go through all the liability slides and causation slides, and then I'll pivot to damages. I'll just talk, and I'll go through all this. I'll talk to them about damages conceptually. I'll talk about Saint Irenaeus, who said the glory of God is man fully alive. That's how we're meant to live. And then we'll talk about fair trade value, horses, Lionel Messi, fair trade value, and full justice. And then we'll walk through economic damages. That's the easy low-hanging fruit, pain and suffering. And in Colorado, our pain and suffering is capped. So then we talk about our third category of damages, impairment. And in that, through the end, I do this technique. I think it's mine. I don't think I stole it from anybody, where I talk to my client. You can watch this on CVN. This is really powerful in our last case. And I deliver all the bad news that they're going to get from doctors or from employers. We're sorry, Heather, but it turns out that the pain you're having in your breast is actually cancer. And we're sorry, Heather, but after 4 months of radiation, it didn't work. The metastases are growing, and now it's in your liver. And we're sorry, Heather, but the medicine that we have to give you and you'll be taking for the next year is going to cause you extreme pain in your gut. You're not going to be able to keep food down. You're going to be in the bathroom all the time, and you're going to be ashamed because you won't always make it to the bathroom. And we're sorry, Heather, but despite all that treatment we did, it's now metastasized into your brain, and you have probably months to live. And we're sorry, Heather, the medicine that we have for you is going to give you not only brain fog, but it's going to start working against your emotions, and you're not going to be able to control them, and you're going to forget sometimes where you are and what you're doing, and so we go through this thing, and then like I start getting sad, and they don't know what's coming, and so we go through that. Sometimes if it's really bad news, like in this last trial, I asked her to leave, and I finished that just to the jury, because the end result, the awful things that are going to happen to her spinal fluid, not knowing who she was, ultimately passing away. She didn't need to hear all that. And so just fun, dramatic techniques to really drive home damages after working through all the fun premises stuff.
All right. In addition to this, you got a few lectures that you're doing with your partner, Sarah. And so tell us, you got creating drama at trial.
Yeah.
What's that about?
Yeah. So you just got a little piece of that, that's one way to create drama in trial. I have some acting experience. I have a lot of fun on the stage. You were so right earlier. When you're comfortable, you can do so much more. You can really lean into being you and having fun. So the drama at trial is a lecture I've done a couple times. It's my favorite one to give. And it's all about how to incorporate drama in opening, closing, directs, crosses, and really give the jury a show in a way that's not over the top, but just little things you can do to keep them interested. Because you're sitting through trials, Dan, it's boring. It's tough,
I mean, out there in court yesterday watching one of Panish's partner, Schultz, do the direct of a prosthetist, whatever because the guy lost a leg,
Yeah.
right? And the different ones and putting them on. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go back to my hotel and do some work.
Yeah.
This is not too exciting. And then before that is the life care planner and going through all the numbers and like mind numbing. I mean, it is not cross-examination, which hopefully is exciting.
Hopefully exciting, right? And so I've got these techniques for every different part of trial of how you can have some fun and insert some drama. But I got my own take on the briefcase close. I know Kimball Jones has been using the briefcase close in rebuttal after talking to me and going through one of my classes. And now Kimball has $300 million verdicts in a row, 100 plus.
I think you give some credit.
So he's going to give me $20 million for the briefcase.
I was hoping for a little piece of it for introducing him to your ideas. I mean, just being the broker of the idea, but apparently that's overreaching.
Kimball's amazing. And so he does the briefcase close in rebuttal, which I just stumbled upon on accident in the fracking case because I ran out of time in my closing. I just didn't rebuttal, and it was amazing. Except for the juror I talked to yesterday. It was terrible there. So, what do you know? So we'll go through that. It's a really fun one.
And you got one about writing and winning your case in the documents or the writing.
In a page and a half. Yeah. No,
a page and a half.
It used to be my favorite one. And so I had,
but now the drama is.
Now the drama's it's just more fun, but it's still a lot of fun. I tell you, I get the most feedback on this one because no one talks about it at any convention except for me. And so it's always well attended because there's no writing seminars and like, how are you going to do a presentation on writing? Everyone hates writing. And I make it fun. I find a way to inject drama into the writing. And it's this concept that people call an intro. You can win your case in your intro if you write it the most persuasive, compelling, heartwarming, call to action kind of way. If you write it the way I'm going to teach, your first page and a half, and introduce it the right way, the reader will be left with one and only one conclusion. And that's that your client needs justice. And he's going to read the rest of the brief to find out how he can give it to him. And so it's kind of like a closing opening argument on paper you can use in every single brief, and it can move the reader in a way they want to find the law and the facts and the rest of the brief to help you win. And so that's how to write that first 2 pages to win your case.
First 2 pages.
A lot of Lord of the Rings references, if that's okay. I don't know if that is good or bad for people, but a lot of LTR.
Lot of LTR. That's
L-O-T-R.
very exciting stuff. That's very exciting stuff you got for us. So the LTR.
See, I got lots of swords in my office. We got swords, right? If you're really watching, so I'm a big swords and dragon guy.
So Kurt, in addition to teaching, you're also doing a little outing plan on Wednesday, June 4th. Where are you taking people?
We're doing a K1 racing go-karts. We have one by my house. I think my kids have been to a few birthday parties there. It's like indoor professional go-kart racing. I did this thing at TLU Vegas. We did dune buggies in the sand dunes. So and people had a blast. It was the day before it all started. I want to do the same kind of theme because I've got terrible injury, so I can't do anything physical right now. But I can get behind the wheel and push the pedal for the most part. And so we're going to get everyone go-karting. I think we're taking 20 people. If there's a huge huge draw. We'll add some more spots. We can always do that. But I want it intimate enough so we can all get to know each other. And we'll go race go-karts for like an hour and a half. We're very close to the hotel. We get transportation. It's going to be a blast, man. You got to wear helmets. It's like legit. Again, I don't know why I'm doing this as a personal injury lawyer. The dune buggies were the scariest thing I've ever done. I just wanted to be done with it when it started. I thought I was going to die. And this is slightly less dangerous, so that's good. But still, you can get hurt, so we'll have waivers.
That's going to be super fun. And the day before that, for people to get there on June 3rd, Ed Saramboli is taking people to surf camp out on the beach in Huntington Beach because it's like the surf capital of the world. And then that same afternoon, my buddy Raj, is hosting a little cabana there at the pool. So whoever gets there early can stop by for a cocktail or some food.
Sweet.
And that night from 6 p.m. to midnight is the pre-game in the presidential suite. So we've got lots of stuff to entertain people ahead of time. And then other than your go-kart, I think there's going to be a pickleball gathering with the Dudley and DeBosier and Supio. I believe that's going to be happening. It's still in the final works there. So got lots of fun stuff to do if you don't want to go to class on Wednesday. You know, you got people that want to go to class all day Wednesday. So me, I'd rather go race go-karts with you, but I can't do either. I got to make sure that the trains run on time. So I won't be able to go for the little outing. It'll be fun.
That's important.
And you also have a lounge outside on the ocean lawn that you'd like to do a lot of recovery stuff with.
That's right. That's right. So we have, this will be our 3rd or 4th year at TLU Huntington Beach, where we have the one and only cold plunge.
Ice bath.
Ice bath. Many names
Yes.
for it. It's a barrel with ice and water. We clean the water every day. We pour it out. We get ice. And we usually do it at lunchtime because everyone's there. So you can have an audience. It's a lot of fun. It's great. It's going to wake you up. You're not going to have any post-lunch coma. And it's out there. Usually people will still jump in the morning if it's still cold. So people really like it. I love it. I'm a devoted acolyte of the ice plunge. Also be waivers for that involved. So
Okay. How about IVs? Are we doing IVs again?
I don't think IVs. I think just cold plunge, but we'll see.
Just cold plunge.
Maybe IVs. We did IVs last year. We'll see. Maybe we'll do IVs one day. I can make that commitment. Let's do that.
One day. We're going to go over IVs. Okay. And then end of September, October, we're going to do a boot camp. So
That's right.
you know, you stopped by the Satch Oliver one with John Romano. That was a depositions, our trial and damages boot camps. Is there something new that I've integrated into the educational platform? Is, I do these, like I'm doing a boot camp next week. That's just me and Giorgio teaching. People are just working on their skills for 4.5 days and working on their cases. But I say there's no big guy. Like, whereas August 13th through 16th, we got Joe Freed. In early December, we got Kimball Jones for the insurance bad faith boot camp. In October, we got John Romano and the spine trial boot camp. And I got these great trial lawyers coming in and helping teach the strategy. So during this boot camp, it's a premises boot camp.
Yes.
So during that boot camp, I'm going to be teaching the performance skills, helping people actually present their evidence better on cross, direct, opening and closing. But what are you going to help them do as far as putting their cases together?
Yeah. So if you've been listening all along, you could probably guess it. Premises liability. Bring your premises case, and we're gonna dive in any of the help that you need, and I'll give you all my strategies. It'll be kind of like the masterclass, but more expanded in ways and more dialed in ways. We've got more time. We've got 5 days, but we're gonna be working the cases that you guys have. And we're going to be finding ways to make them better, from depo strategy to the depo order, to the depositions, how to present stuff at trial, how to get the discovery, the experts you may need. So it's like all the biggest hits from the premises liability masterclass applied to your cases, to the needs that you have. And so we meet up beforehand. We talk about things. I can plan accordingly, and we can plug everything in. And hopefully by the time we get out of that, your case has added at least 1 0 to it.
At least 1 0.
At least 1 0.
And just let people know, on these boot camps, there's 6 weeks of Zoom meetups where we're going to go over the performance skills that you'll be learning. And, the story that we're going to be practicing the performance on is going to be a premises case. So we have a set, master case that we learn from. And then also meet up with Kurt and everybody starts working on their cases ahead of time. Everybody knows each other's cases ahead of time. And the class is limited to 10 people, so it's 2 groups of 5. So it's very focused work. My goal is to transform, our goal is to transform people's cases, hence their lives and their careers. That's the ultimate goal, is to transform and become much better and confident so we can be calm and be authentic is the goal. So Kurt, how do people get a hold of you?
You can call my cell, 352-262-1460. That's Gainesville, Florida. Go Gators, national champs. That's right.
Oh, those Gators. You know, Joe Camarillango's a double Gator.
Yeah, so am I. We're both double Gators.
You're a double Gator?
Double Gator,
Oh!
baby. I think we're the only school that does that double Gator thing. No one's like, I'm a double Hawkeye. I don't think anyone does that.
I'm a double Wolverine.
Yeah, so that's my cell. Chomp chomp. You can email me, kz at zanerlaw.com. That's right. It's just Zaner Law now. No more Zaner Harden. Love Mark. Mark is doing awesome things in the music world, but I retained the firm. I've got kind of streamlined some things. Same office, same website, all that jazz. There's just more spears and swords involved in our logos and Game of Thrones references. So KZ at zanerlaw.com. Texting me is better because I get too many emails and forget to respond. So text me if you can.
They can get lost. I know. If somebody sends me a text, much more likely they're going to get a response
That's
in
right.
a timely fashion. And let me tell you, anybody that doesn't have access to TLU On Demand, you want to try it out, just shoot me a text or email. I'll shoot you a complimentary access code so you can check it all out, because it's all the pleadings, transcripts, PowerPoints for all these cases, 4 years of live conferences, everything back all the way before, TLU 2021. And there's like 420 webinars now that are on there with breakdowns of trials. You've done a few of them, breakdowns of your past verdicts, explaining to people how you got there. So Kurt, before we hang up here, we always end with cross-examination of the defense medical expert, because this, I think, as I tell people this, I've worked on creating a lot of different things. I think help plaintiffs, lawyers, and criminal defense lawyers are my two people. I started as a criminal guy. Still working on building my program to train all the public defenders in the country, but I feel like I'm getting closer and closer. But I need lots of instructors to do that. And so, you know what I mean? So as more people train religiously, because training one time for 4 days is great, but if you don't keep training, you're going to forget all the shit you learned, right? It's just part of, skills disappear. As this guy, the person said, you want to make Michael Jordan look mortal? Don't let him practice for a month, and he'll look like the rest of the basketball players. All right. Skills take practice. So, but anyways, is my cross-examination skills, technique of the defense medical expert, because I think that people do not practice their skills nearly enough, especially on cross. This guy, Craig Peters, came over for like a weekend, and we sat down and we transitioned the cop cross-examination to defense medical expert cross-examination. So that's what I do at the end of every one. So if people don't want to hear it another time, they don't have to. But if they do, because the repetition helps, guess what? They can. Because I like people that have listen, Dan, I've listened to your podcast. I've learned, I know this one. I'm like, okay, give it to me. And they're like, okay, you give it to me first. You know what I'm saying? 'Cause they don't know it that well. You got to know it. You got to practice it. So here are the core skills of cross-examination. Leading questions only. One new fact per question. Looping, which means to establish a fact and repeat that fact in the next statement. I was watching Gallipo in this civil rights trial. He loops and he loops and he loops, which is great. So it's great technique he's demonstrating. Cross-examining in the present tense. Most people cannot do that. I don't care how great a lawyer they are, they just never think to do that. They're always in the past. And if you cross-examine, instead of you walked into the room, sir, you walk into the room and there's a desk there, then it allows you to have movement and create space, even on cross, so people can see the story in front of their eyes. And it forces you to visualize it, forces the witness to visualize it, but more importantly, allows the jury to actually picture the story. Instead of just having words, they have to transition into images, which puts a lot more strain on their bandwidth. Dropping all the taglines like right, correct, isn't it true, true. Or if you need to use them, to at least create some space in between your statement and the tagline, and using it as a control. So if I say, doctor, you're a board certified medical expert, and you sit there and stare at me for 15 seconds, I'll be like, true. And so instead of, doctor, you're a board certified medical expert, true. I think the first is much more effective because it allows that time and space for the mind to process the information, to sit with the people. And then it's like I had to force it. It's like, true. It's like, oh, I didn't know it was a question, right? Okay. Dropping all the filler words like and, so, okay, etc. People just put this crap in because they can't handle the silence.
Right.
Clutters.
Right. I hate that one. Right.
Right. Clutters it up. All right. Effectively using a flip chart. A flip chart is one of the most powerful tools in the courtroom. So simple, but most people will not use it because they are not comfortable using it. They're not, I don't have good handwriting. Yeah, nobody has good handwriting, buddy, until you practice. You practice writing on a flip chart and you are intentional and you practice your writing. Then you have good handwriting. Putting only one topic per page. So whatever the concept is you want on the page, you space it out so it takes up the whole page. So now you have a one-page demonstrative for closing with this concept on it. Being intentional with our emotional state and control of our emotional state, because there really should be only 2 dominant emotional states on cross, and it's not anger and frustration. No, if you get anywhere near those, you start to get pissy because the witness is running on. The witness is like, you're losing. They got a little remote control in their hand. They're pushing little buttons, and you're like, you're losing, right? The 2 emotions are curiosity when you're laying foundations, and disappointment when you're impeaching them and showing what liars they are or how biased they are. How sad it is, doctor, that you spent your whole life taking the Hippocratic oath to help people. Yet you're so greedy that you're willing to sell your soul and hurt injured people to make money. It must be sad to live with yourself. That should be your mind, the mindset of disappointment. And bringing the jury in when it's appropriate. Like some people are comfortable asking all their questions to the jury. I'm not. I think the only time things should be directed to the jury if it's like, flag, this is big, people. Please pay attention to this piece right here. That's why I'm looking at you and making eye contact with you as I say it. So those are really the core skills. But these skills must be practiced. These skills cannot be practiced in the content of your actual cross. That's why it's like, I can't go to trial and see somebody and give them any feedback because there's no way they can make an adjustment on the fly with the pressure of the trial and the bandwidth. They're never going to do it because they're not comfortable. I don't care who they are. It's very rare that somebody could do that, okay? Maybe somebody like Panish could. Actually, like Panish, he's the most adaptable superstar I've ever met. Like, I could give him notes during, in between, and he'll make adjustments. And he's not connected. He's like, if he thinks it's a better idea, boom, he's on it. He's willing to risk it. But generally, you have to practice stuff before you get there, okay? So here it is, the cross-examination of the defense medical expert. You're going to be Dr. Kurt Zaner. All right?
Yes.
Are you ready, Dr. Zaner?
I'm ready.
Okay. Doctor, you're a board-certified medical expert.
Yes, I am.
To become board-certified, this requires advanced education.
Yes, sir, it does.
This education, it takes place after medical school.
Yep.
But while you were in medical school, you did take classes.
Yes.
One of the classes that you took was on how to conduct a proper medical evaluation.
Many classes on that, yes.
Okay, so obviously, one thing I forgot to mention to you is pacing and breathing. People tend to speed up on cross and not breathe. So every time I pause, I'm inhaling. And so therefore, I have plenty of oxygen to deliver my statements. I don't rush myself, and I don't run out of air and trail off. That's what people do when they don't breathe because of pressure. So we'll only practice slowing down if we slow down in training. I love when people say to me, oh, it seems so robotic because you're going so slow. I'm like, yes, I'm going so slow so that you can see what I'm doing. But trust me, you walk into that courtroom, that pressure hits you, you'll speed right back up to what you think is a good pace. All right. But if you don't practice going slow, that pressure of that courtroom will make you too fast. You'll be straining the bandwidth of your audience to remember. Like, I'm in court with Panish down here in San Diego, and we're walking out. He goes, you like my pace, Ambrose? Look at that. Going nice and slow. Breathe. I'm like, doing a good job, Panish. He's so funny. Anyways, got to pace ourselves. Got to work on pacing, okay?
Yep.
The next part. So we train these in segments. So in coaching, they do this one segment. Everybody does this one segment so that we can compare segments and people can learn from each other's segments. So that way we don't do it all at once. Anyways, just for the purpose of coaching, breaking things into smaller pieces, learning that little skill, and then mastering it one little skill at a time, and then moving on to the next skill. Next skill is the flip chart. Doctor, you're trained that a proper medical evaluation, it must be impartial.
Yes.
So I have a flip chart right here. The first page is blank, so nobody sees it, but I flip it over, and it says proper at the top. It's underlined. Then I write number 1. I write impartial in big capital letters, so it takes up that whole space right there. Then I put a number 2 underneath it, queuing the jury up to stay curious. More is coming, people. Doctor.
Oh, I like that.
Doctor, by impartial, what we mean is that you're not an advocate for either side.
That's right.
Doctor, you're trained that a proper medical evaluation must not only be impartial. So I turn and I look at it, use my hand to point to it. That's called glance control. But it must also be objective.
That's accurate.
So I write down objective in capital letters, and I put a number 3. And now I've used up the entire space where it says proper. Now it's going to say impartial, objective, and number 3, waiting for one more word to come down there. By objective, what we mean is that you don't cherry pick the evidence to support a desired opinion.
That's right.
So obviously, we all know that the mind cannot process negatives, right? It's like, you're not an asshole. You know, I'm calling you an asshole, right? It's like, don't think of a purple elephant. Don't think of a purple elephant with a pink tutu, right? Of course you're going to think of it. So of course the jury has to picture him cherry picking the evidence. And we know he cherry picked the evidence, so it's totally authentic what we did, right? We know what they did. They know what they did. And so by having this stuff pre-written out there with the structure, what it does, it causes the witness so much more anxiety because they know this is not extemporaneous. This is prepared, right? You know where it's going. You're leading them down that hall and shutting the door. So we get to go fact, they're fucked. And so the next part is, doctor, you're trained that a proper medical evaluation must not only be impartial and objective, but it must also be complete.
Correct.
So I write down complete. By complete, what we mean is you consider all relevant information.
That's also true.
So I write down complete. Doctor, the opposite of a proper medical evaluation, one that's impartial, objective, and complete, well, that would be a biased evaluation.
You could call it that.
So I flipped the sheet over, and of course at the top it says biased. Doctor, you're trained and you know that there are certain risks associated with a paid expert's choice to conduct a biased medical evaluation.
Yes.
One of those risks is that the jury could be misinformed about the patient's condition.
Potentially.
So I write number 1, misinformed, and then I put number 2. And then when I said the jury can be misinformed, I look over and say that to the jury. So it's almost like, warning people, this guy's going to misinform you, perhaps. Be on the lookout for it, okay? That's all I'm saying. Be on the lookout. Doctor, you're trained and you know. So now it's called stepping. You're trained and you know. So it's like a universal truth that if a paid expert chooses to conduct a biased medical evaluation, not only could the jury be misinformed about the patient's condition, but they could also be misled as to the extent of the patient's injuries.
Yes.
So, of course, I write misled, and I put a number 3. Doctor, you're trained and you know that if a paid expert chooses to conduct a biased medical evaluation, not only could the jury be misinformed about the patient's condition and misled as to the extent of the patient's injuries, but perhaps worst of all, they could be deceived into undervaluing the human harms and suffering that were caused.
That is also true.
So notice a change in my demeanor. Now I've got, this is very terrible.
Right.
This is the worst of all. So doctor, so I write down deceived. So you got misinformed, misled, deceived, right? That's another example of stepping. So people are more willing to believe somebody's going to deceive them if they've already believed they're going to misinform and mislead them.
Yeah.
Okay, you can't go all the way to deceive because that's maybe going too far. You have to get the mind accepting of it, right? So here comes the end. So doctor, here's my question. So that's called a refocusing move. Or let me ask you this question. It's like squirrel. Like the 20 questions I just asked you, they were just to get to this fucking point here, sir. So let me ask you this question. On December 14th, 2022, you had a choice to make. So tell us all, what did you choose to do? Now, any witness worth their salt is going to be like, huh? What do you mean? Totally ambiguous question. You want them to be like, huh? So then you say, what do you mean? Say, what do you mean?
I'm sorry, what do you mean by that, counselor?
What I mean is, that's called spontaneous looping, or I don't understand. Well, to help you understand, so whatever they say last, you repeat back to them. So what I mean is, did you choose to do a proper medical evaluation? One that was, and I get to flip the page back over so it makes a lot of noise. One that was impartial, objective, and complete, like you were trained to do? Or did you choose to violate your training and conduct a biased evaluation? And I flip it, knowing all the risks.
Well, I conducted a proper one, obviously.
Of course you did. And so I said, come up and put your initials on. So I flip it back over. So you're saying proper? Put your initials on it. So you've been doing this how many years, Zaner?
12 years, 13 years, 15 years.
13 years, whatever it is. But how many defense experts have you ever had in your entire career where you thought they were impartial, objective, and complete?
0.
Exactly. And they know what they did too. So what you did is you just forced them to lie right early in the beginning, and you drew a line in the sand. Because by doing a cross like this, you've called that witness a lying sack of shit without calling them a lying sack of shit. And because you called them a lying sack of shit, the jury's really interested, right? Because they like the tension. They like the friction. They don't want to see a kumbaya, hug it out. This is just a simple, no, they want to see like, I need you to slay this dishonest piece of shit, because they are an impediment to justice. And this is how, things get off the whack when people come to court and lie. But it's our job to expose the lies and get so the jury knows that's a lie. It's one thing to get them to impeach them. It's another thing to have the jury care that you did it. Two separate concepts. So
true.
And this cross could be adjusted to any expert. Okay. You just change what the dangers are. If it was a biomechanics expert, the jury could be misinformed about the forces involved, misled about the potential for injury, and perhaps worst of all, deceived and undervaluing. That's a good word, isn't it?
Great. It's great.
It's solid.
You're right. You can't lead with that. You got to build up to that.
Right, because it's too strong.
Too strong.
It's like, you know what I mean? But it draws a line in the sand. That's the beauty of it. It's like, and it can be adjusted. It can be practiced. Like these techniques need to be practiced in deposition, so you're comfortable with you practice your pacing all the time. You practice every opportunity. You got to practice. We got to practice in daily life. Every day we live, practice our skills for that courtroom. Cannot be a separation. Who we are every day in life and every day in the courtroom. Even the skills I teach in connection, I tell people, you got to practice every day. Oh, how do we practice? Well, how about that person that's a clerk at the store who's got a miserable fucking life, who works for $14 an hour and does the same grind every day? Instead of asking them where's the milk at, can you say, excuse me, could you tell me where the milk's at? And see if you can get them to smile at you. See if you can practice using your neurons to affect other people's mindset, right? Because you get somebody to smile back at you, they can't help but like you. They can't. It's neuro. It's built. It's our hard wiring. But it takes skill to be in control of ourselves all the time and not just be however we want to be. Oh, I'm being authentic. I'm nervous. I'm pranced. I'm being authentic. I'm angry. I'm frustrated. That's how I feel right now. It's like, no, nobody gives a shit how you feel. Okay? It only matters, how do you want the audience to feel? How do you want that other person to feel? How do you want that jury to feel? That's the only thing that you should be thinking. How do I want you to feel? Because you are the leader up there and you control the situation. So we got to practice every day and making eye contact with people before we start talking. Being mindful, using our hands effectively. As soon as we start talking to somebody, our hands should be getting involved. If you want your hands to be a good bridge, a good physical connector between you and the person you're talking to. It takes a lot of practice, though. That's it, Kurt Zaner. That's your little tutorial on cross-examination. And it's going to be great. I'm so excited. I'm so glad you're bringing so many of your friends with you from Colorado. And so a lot of people are coming from Colorado. Your buddy, Steve Berg.
Nice.
He's coming with his dad, Mike Berg. A whole bunch of people from the firm is coming. And, I know our friend Ben Rose is coming. A couple there's a big employment firm that, people from there are coming. They're doing my boot camp. So this is a heavy Colorado presence. I love it. Could be more people from Colorado coming than any other state outside of California.
We're going to get some more. We're going to get some more today.
All right. Love it. Yeah. All right, Zaner. Good chat.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. This is always fun. Thank you so much, Dan. And I did learn something in that cross. It was cool. I learned more.
Thanks, buddy.
Yep.
Appreciate it. I'm always working at it.
Boom.
Ready to train with the Titans and set records with your verdicts? Register for our live conferences and boot camps at triallawyersuniversity.com. Start getting your reps in before the big event by going to tluondemand.com to gain instant access to live lectures, case analysis, and skills training videos from the trial lawyer champions you love and respect, as well as pleadings, transcripts, PowerPoints, and notes for a roadmap to victory. Join the group that continues to get extraordinary results. Trial Lawyers University. Produced and powered by LawPods.